Hey everyone, welcome to Tellor. I guess it's Tellor community call / the Tellor values call. December 22nd, 2021. So last one before the holidays, if you will. So next week we're going to do our normal community call, but it's going to be like a year in review. So it'll be a fun one too. So be sure to hop on that one, and we'll just, I think you guys will probably just go over the article. So we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so the big reason we wanted to kind of have this call, we did this probably what, 3 months ago now, a little over 3 months ago with just the team, but we didn't put it out, and I wish we would have put it out because it was like such a great conversation. But we want to do it more often. It's just talking about more of the why of Tellor, like why are we doing this? Why are we all here? What is sort of the goal we're striving for?
What do we care about? What's our priority?
Yeah, because it's, we can just look like if you go back and you can go look at our community call from a year ago, the Tellor team and the Tellor community is made up of a whole bunch of different people. It's awesome. We have way more people on the call. We have, way more people in the community, and it's great. And because and that's awesome, but then at the same time, you want to sort of kind of check yourselves as far as how are the values changing of Tellor? How are, the people who we bring in sort of adjusting it? How is the crypto space as a whole moving and changing what we want to do and what we can do? And it's because I want to have like that orientation to where we're all sort of going, but none of this is set in stone. Like if we change our values or something comes up and we want to focus on a different problem to help out something different, or we feel like we could make a bigger impact in some slightly different way, like we can change.
Yeah, we can use these periodic calls as a way to calibrate and sort of check our feet. Here comes Ryan.
So, I mean, I don't know, how do we want to start it? Do you want me to, I think we were talking about.
Yeah, where
I think with the overview,
Sure. So
maybe let's start with like the crypto, like yesterday.
Well, yeah, we know, like, what are our classic values, the ones that we're absolutely 100% sure we have, like the easy low.
Well, it's always really weird because like you can say like, oh, well, there's like decentralization, like we like,
right.
There's like decentralization in being a project that isn't scammy, doesn't sort of go after a lot of, there's talking about the image, but I think, as we were talking about yesterday, like the three of us had a call just to go over what we talk about on this call. If you look at, okay, so let's say we succeed in building a phenomenal Oracle product that goes on every chain, like what's the ultimate vision for Tellor right now? It's like, we are the premier Oracle. We're decentralized, like we have a network of reporters that's robust. It's decentralized. We have communities of voting token holders on multiple different chains. The team basically isn't needed because we have developers who are just donating time and working from the DAO. And it's this phenomenal product. What do we achieve? What does that get us? So.
And what values does that desire?
Yeah,
represent?
like if it's like, okay, that gets us a whole lot of money, that's cool. Or like if it's like, oh, we enrich a whole bunch of banks, like that would not be cool. So we want to make sure that that's not what we do. And I would say, if you look at, okay, so basically our values and the way that we're sort of positioned here as an Oracle product, we're sort of a key infrastructure piece in the crypto movement as a whole. Whereas our mission is almost tied directly to the mission of the blockchains that we're building on and the projects that are building upon us. Whenever you look at, okay, so we do succeed, that means crypto can succeed. And whenever you look at, okay, well, how is crypto succeeding nowadays? Like what, so if our goals are sort of extensions of the goals of crypto, then we rightly have to look at, okay, well, what are the goals of crypto and how have those changed over time? Because I think they definitely have. If you look at, like the original Bitcoin guys and, the old the old folks that got in, back with the Ron Paul days and the um, pre-centralized exchanges, where it was only you were trading on a centralized exchange, but it was still crypto based. It came from a lot of, there was this libertarian philosophy. We're going to decentralize money. That was the big idea of it. And then it's sort of evolved.
It feels like we've gotten away from that.
We have, and that's okay. Like everybody grows up and becomes not a libertarian anymore. But I think, like at the same time, like, what is it? So, I think even in 2017, most of the founders of projects in 2017, they had those deeply philosophical roots almost of like, we're in it for decentralization, we're in it for almost the, like Vitalik, I would say, isn't necessarily a libertarian, but he's into economics, he's into kind of this futurist politics stuff to try and make the world a better place. Fast forward to today, the crypto landscape probably looks different. I'm sure most of you, if you guys are out there even casually at all, like a lot of NFT, a lot of art stuff, a lot of DAOs. DAOs are huge. And why are they doing that? And it's much more sort of like anti-system in a way. They're like,
It's kind of this new, because we're skipping over,
yeah,
you're not intending to skip it, but like we had this DeFi focus that I think was the big distraction away from some of the original core values of crypto in general. And we're seeing this new phase that I think is getting back a little bit to being anti-establishment.
Yes,
with the DAOs cropping up like crazy, and just new ways to organize and collaborate and coordinate as groups and organizations.
Well, and I think it's super cool. I mean, you have like, it's become much more about sort of this social organization, if you will, and like we're going to do things our way, and we're not going to listen to how society wants us to do it. Like it's amazing. Like I can think of a few founders of projects. We won't say any names, but like they should, in the past, they would have totally went and set up an LLC or a C Corp, and they didn't do any of that. They just went and they're like, I'm going to go issue some tokens and we're going to start a DAO. Basically, like regulations have gotten to the point that it's so cumbersome and confusing to comply that we're just like, no, we're going to go do it our way. And that is just awesome to me. Like if we can enable this world of almost like rapid experimentation on DAOs and rapid experimentation with just economics in general, I think people have moved past the libertarian values of like, a fixed supply and sound money. And now it's just like, fuck it, let's go print money and create shit. And that's like, that's super cool to me.
I think it's not just like the money aspect of it. I think actually DAOs go back or bring us back to a full circle of like, what was the original intent? Like, why do we even want to decentralize things? Why do we want to take power away from the few and like sort of like distribute it among, the immediate, I think at the beginning it was more of a very broad, like everybody under one umbrella, versus now, even though we're going back to that value, it's like, we're okay with thinking like, well, maybe not everybody falls in the same umbrella, but they can still have a decentralized source of say in what's happening. And I think that actually that the turn that we're going into now is, I would say it's closer to the original idea of decentralization, not just in the terms of libertarianism, Nick, but I think it actually goes back to that. And I'm actually pretty excited to see that.
Cool. Yeah, I think like Spuddy, thoughts. We'll go around here.
I hear.
Well, I mean, you've been.
What
So
are you hearing?
Spuddy's been our oldest, besides the founders. Spuddy's been a member of the community longer than everyone else. So we'll go with Spuddy. I mean,
one of the reasons I can get fully behind what Tellor is doing is because we do care about things being decentralized at the core of the protocol and having open access for everybody in the world. Everybody in the world having open access, if not equal access, because not everybody has like money to start with or whatever. But So then another trend that I see in crypto is people talking about Web3. And I think that we're just talking about trends in crypto. So
Sure.
the Web3 trend is one that I don't like, because when you say Web3, then you're comparing it to something that's called Web2, which is like Facebook, right? So in order to make something better than Facebook, it doesn't have to be very good. Like, it doesn't have to actually have a lot of decentralization. It could just have, like, to go from something that's entirely centralized, where the user is the product, to go to something that is like a little bit decentralized, doesn't necessarily mean that there is like open access to everyone, or
Sure.
full decentralization.
But I mean,
So-
I think this goes into a central question. Like, would you say cryptocurrency has to get mainstream adoption to succeed, or that we do, or do you think in the future that, because like Facebook got mainstream adoption and everything like that, like, do you see, like, Teller's obviously an infrastructure block, but even the people that are building on top of us, do they have to ever get mainstream adoption for us to succeed?
I think crypto does have mainstream adoption.
Wow.
Not on a huge scale, but among people who, well, I want to say among people who would, the type of person who would care. No, you know what? It doesn't have mainstream adoption.
I think, I know, in my
I'd say that's
perspective,
like main. Oh, God.
sorry, it doesn't have to maintain mainstream adoption as long as it actually does have an impact to those that actually need it. Like for us it's fun. For us, it's just, for us, we're building infrastructure that obviously we're trying to make as decentralized as possible. And then we hope it gets like more broadly adopted. But in the end, like for some parts of the world, this is just it's just fun. And for other parts of the world, this is something that actually allows them to transact, just because of the way, maybe their economy is going, or maybe the way that their governments work. So for me, it's not so much about mainstream adoption, but adoption in those areas and places where it actually makes an impact.
This brings up like just the value that we were actually talking about yesterday in the office, which was, just thinking of our adoption, Tellor's adoption as an Oracle. Is the goal for us to be adopted by every protocol out there and be on every layer one possible out there, or just the ones that sort of align with what we care about? Like, if we were just used by 5 really awesome decentralized censorship resistant protocols out there, that really used us and we're out there doing some good, would we feel like we've reached that goal, as opposed to deploying everywhere and being on the the Solanas of the world?
Yeah.
Or
You just reminded me what my original point was going to be. My original point was going to be
that's my goal.
I'm excited about building something that will last into the future, and I think that protocols have to be decentralized and able to run by like as many people as possible. Like, need to be able to need to have access to the stuff that makes it go, like the biggest number of people possible. Like, you don't have to have a data center. You can run Tellor on your computer that's sitting on your desk, just like you can run Ethereum on a gaming computer. You don't. So when people have open access to the stuff that makes it go, then it's decentralized and it can last long into the future.
Yeah, and then Tally, I think you were going to say something, or just thoughts in general.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. To Spuddy's point, I think at least in the United States, definitely not on a world level, considering that I think at least half or 2/3 of the world does not own a smartphone. But in the United States, I would definitely say crypto is at least mainstream awareness level, but probably not at the point of mainstream adoption. Another thought I had is the way I perceive a core value of crypto as a space is and it's something that is somewhat I think it's like a goal, at least how I see it at Tellor, but like is a little bit difficult to implement in terms of like the system that we've architected is like, I sort of see like crypto as like a desire to like move away from like, sort of like capital as like largely like a competition or like especially an unfair asymmetric competition among like smaller players, at which like larger players just like sort of like whales exploit and like smaller players fight for scraps, which is like basically like the architecture of the traditional financial system. And even like by extension, something like Facebook or Amazon, where like essentially we're like almost living on feudal property by like, or considering the idea that like, yeah, I definitely consider feudal property, but like something that like almost every algorithm that like decides how we use the internet is like decided within a 50-mile radius of San Francisco. And like what, like 2 billion people use the internet. To that point, like I sort of see, I'm personally like optimistic about Web3 in the sense that like, I personally wouldn't want to see a world where like we would replace things like Facebook with Facebook that's just like community owned, because I think like a lot of the attributes of something like Facebook are like inherently negative. So I'm sort of like somewhat cautious about like some people's interpretations of Web3. I'd say like a beauty of it that I see is that like it's an idea that is like in the eye of its beholder, and I think that's like a beauty of like it as like a formative early and like to the merit of its decentralization. Like people can define Web3 as they like. It has no formal definition, and like it's how people relate to it like is really like a relation of like its ability to be like loosely defined, which I think is like a property of like a decentralized movement. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but that's a lot of stuff.
That's a really good point. I think we're seeing like there's more options out there in terms of blockchains themselves, and you're having these new networks crop up, and they obviously have their own scale and system of priorities and what they value, and people can flock to those networks if it aligns with them, or if it doesn't, they can go elsewhere. And I think that's one of the cool things I think about the space in general, is it's providing the tools for these things to all crop up, kind of like survival of the fittest in a way. And we get to decide, like the communities, the groups of people can decide whether or not they want to organize around a certain set of values or not. And you'd hope, the cynic in me is, thinking that like, well, the majority of people are going to organize around BS and they're just going to rebuild Web 2. It's going to be Google again. We're going to vote it through.
We're going to flock to the protocol that promises the biggest price return on their.
No matter, even if in exchange for real openness and decentralization, people, might choose their baser instincts, but.
And so like, I guess the last thing I want to say is like the way I like appreciate Tellor like as an organization primarily, and also one of many reasons, but I think something that really sets it apart is sort of like, if you contrast with a project like Solana, maybe, I don't really like to name names, but you take Solana, for example, and like, as I see Solana, it's sort of like, or a lot of like NFT projects, for example, or things of that nature, sort of the idea of like, it's been demonstrated, like if you're a business owner and you're like, okay, like it's been demonstrated to me that like there's an opportunity to like, there's a growing market and there's space in the market. So like, I may not even care about what I'm doing, but like, I'm going to insert myself in the market, hire professional managers, and like grow a business. And like, fundamentally, like how we operate is nothing like that. Like, if anything, I would say there are like a lot of sacrifices made, like oppositional to like quick money that like we take every day and every week and every month, like in terms of short-term and long-term decisions that I think like better inform us as like an organization really like devoted towards like ideological development, like fostering new ideologies versus, and like philosophies about money and social organization, as compared to like taking advantage of like an opportunity for capital. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, I think we don't necessarily need to get caught up too much in it, except to just sort of check ourselves as time goes on. But there's always like the goal of something, and then there's like what actually happens. Like you can have the goal to sort of democratize some of this finance and make things more equitable. you know, as I think even Brenda was saying, and then you can look at like the reality of whether or not it's actually happening. That doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't your goal originally, but it may have just played out differently, and you sort of have to check how it worked out. You know, I think that's happened with a lot of crypto, where, you know, we want to sort of open up access to the world, but like transactions are really expensive, so it doesn't do that. And then, you know, you want to sort of make it so anybody can invest in protocols. Well, what's actually happened is, you know, a bunch of VCs are making money. So as long as you don't sort of lose sight of the goal, and it becomes good. But yeah, I guess thoughts from
Yeah, is any, what's this conversation?
this is Ryan.
This is Ryan.
That's all Ryan.
Okay. Is anything cropping up for anybody as we sort of talk? I mean, we're all over the place here, but what's popping in everybody else's head as they hear this?
Or we can go around.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Josh got something.
Josh
Brenda, you've been
raised his
talking.
hand nicely.
Yeah, no, personally, I'm really excited about the implications of what Web3 can do. And honestly, I just think it's a matter of, and it's a combination of, I think, multiple projects, multiple companies. Like, for instance, yesterday I was at the movies, and it's the first time I've ever seen a crypto ad. It was crypto.com. And I know that they, as a project, are doing a lot just to try to, I guess, spread awareness about Web3 and crypto and stuff, like them buying Staples Center to rename it after them, and then just like a whole bunch of other PR moves. I think eventually, just once the public gets saturated with just, you know, crypto, eventually people are going to be like, okay, well, what is this? And like people who are in the space in the capacity that we are kind of like laying down the groundworks for it. And I don't know, like people like us have like a really good opportunity to be able to I guess point the direction of whatever this flow of momentum is eventually going to be. Because I honestly think it's eventually just going to, kind of like how Web 2 and Facebook and all that stuff just started to grow and just become huge practically overnight. Obviously not, you know, directly overnight, but just like in the scheme of things over a couple of years, all of a sudden, you know, Facebook went to like having 1 million users to 1 billion users pretty quickly relatively. And it's just like, I see a similar thing happening with crypto. It's just a little bit more of an uphill curve as far as education. And I think that's the main, it's always kind of been the main barrier to entry, I think, with Web3 is just education. Like so many people even that I talk to, because I've definitely came in as a crypto newbie, but the more and more people I talk about it, the more they actually seem interested in, and it's just a matter of education, I think. And with that, like constant reinforcement from other companies and other projects, I think
You got some background noise.
yeah. Oh, sorry about
It's
that.
good though.
I think we're just we're just headed towards an eventuality where there will be some form of whether it's completely the democratized way that we view Web3, or whether it's some other type of I guess compromised version of what we want to meet everybody's needs. I think it's an eventuality point, and I don't know. That's why being in a company like this is super exciting, because it's like laying the groundwork for all that.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Going around, another person who's been in Tellor a long time, Dr. Babs, thoughts? I mean, you came over from, you know, like you're somebody who's like seen us sort of work over a long time, and then, you know, maybe the values were a reason you were attracted to come work at Tellor. I don't know, but would love to hear kind of your thoughts.
For sure. I mean, I think that, geez, I don't know, where do I start? We've talked about so much. But yeah, no, I've been around the team for a while, and certainly learned a lot from talking with the team. Just become fascinated with the entire concept of crypto and the community, decentralization, and I think what we were talking about was back in the beginning was what is good, and what is decentralization the goal? Is mass adoption the goal? I think there's a question of, is mass adoption of a decentralized system under a DAO that's controlled by everybody, is that really, would that be a great thing? I don't really know. I guess I think what we can hope for though is that just we get a bunch of, yeah, I guess that's the fear, is that if whatever is gets most likely whatever gets adopted by the masses is going to be centralized. So I think what we have to hope for really is that we can create these smaller communities that but still with the infrastructure where it's easy enough for the everyday people to get involved. So I think that's really where we have to focus, is just on making it, decentralization easy and usable for everybody. So it's exciting to be part of, how to try to figure this out and to create something that's, like I said, actually good.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but like at the same point, like I don't want to be, like some of how like my views have changed over the years, and you look at like, is decentralization sort of the best avenue in all cases? Because like you can have decentralization of some levels, but then you can have sort of even centralization within given DAOs or within given projects, and still sort of be decentralized at the core infrastructure. Because like you could say, like, if you're doing like on a more of a geopolitical level, where there's like socialism and capitalism is decentralized and socialism is centralized, and it really simplifies things to say like, well, decentralization is always better in every sense. Well, because there's probably a lot of maybe corporations that want to move everything towards privatization, and it can lead to some negative consequences. So yeah, it can be saying like which pieces of Tellor or which projects that we sort of push towards, and where it is centralized, we have to almost make sure that the outcome is the outcome that we want, not just a sort of blind dogmatic drive towards one thing or another. But sorry,
Right.
Brenda.
But I know that I think that one of the ways that I think that I view centralization, and actually, Tally, you just said this, it's like decentralization is actually a freedom of choice, because we want what we want. We should be able to build it. And then if another community feels differently and they want to be part of a chain that has 2 validators, because they want speed and that's what they value, then they should have the freedom to choose it. And the way that I see how this hopefully builds up, there will be some unintended consequences. There will be some protocols that just go completely haywire. But this is all an experiment, and I feel that it is even general life, like any type of endeavor that you begin, you obviously, I hope, have the best of intentions and you have this goal and you drive through it or towards it. And then if all of a sudden you went like completely haywire and you just have to start over with a new protocol, with a new experiment, and just tweak the way that you did it before. And the fact that if we can create an infrastructure where anybody and everybody can actually do that and fork and just rebuild, I think that's I think an easier, or maybe not an easier thing to do, but I hope that's what we actually build as an architecture, so that there is that freedom of people to actually follow whatever they want to do. Because at the end of the day, if you just want anybody to, and everybody has different things that they value, bottom line. So freedom of choice, decentralization, I think that's pretty, goes hand in hand. So
We'll call more people out.
Yeah,
All right.
you know they love that.
Yeah, Will. I mean, Will's another person who's been around. I'll call Will out because I know he's fine talking. Will.
I mean, it's.
Oh, for those that don't know of Will, because I don't think we've even introduced him on a call. Will is relatively new to Tellor. He's
Officially,
Yeah.
been around for.
He's been building our websites for a long time.
Yeah.
And now we actually brought him on the team. So everyone, this is Will.
Hey guys. So like a lot of what's been said so far kind of echoes with kind of my stance on it. In talking about, adoption and going, oh, sorry. Speaking of centralization, my echo right now is like talking to me. But what as far as like where we are and like there's like the crossing the chasm and how much education needs to happen in order for people to understand that these protocols exist and what they're for, and if they have a project in mind or they want to offer a particular service, even knowing that they would need certain pieces of infrastructure, I think is something that, you know, the greater swell of crypto understanding is aiding with. But I think we still definitely have a ways to go in terms of it being as commonplace as like Stripe is for payment processors. If you wanted to go start your own e-commerce store, and you didn't want to use like an off-the-shelf product to take care of your payment processing. And there are other examples like that where like if you want to do something, it's kind of understood, okay, you need to have this piece, and this piece in place, or you could use these particular types of pieces.
The value that's popping in my head while listening to you that is actually, because that's what as we're talking, like I'm trying to think of like, what values term does this sort of concept represent? But what you're describing is a new one that's popped into my head, which is kind of like this long-term, you know, this long-term approach or understanding and acceptance that like that we're still really early and you know, we're not there yet, and we have to just, you know, we're all in this sort of waiting game where we're waiting for everything to mature to get to the point where all this stuff we talk about actually becomes more usable and more widespread or more effective in some way. And we're all sort of like okay with that. And well, we hope, and we've always talked about being like having the long-term vision instead of like this sort of short-term, you know, chasing the market cycles thing. But I don't know, was I accurate there and sort of what I was hearing from you, Will?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. No, but I think we had talked about it before, you know, like whenever we refer back to like the music example of, you know, like if we are, say, the Napster of the world, you know, like or torrent software, for instance, as far as like, you always have the option to go illegally download music, but most people just buy it. So we're like the fallback option. But in a way, it's sort of useful because it's a giant check on the music industry that says like, if you guys get too expensive and too restrictive, I'm going to go illegally download it.
I don't understand paying for music at all.
Right, like now I don't, but you know, like it's,
Yeah.
but you don't even have
That's
to
a core
illegally
value.
download it.
That's a core value for me. Yeah.
Free music.
You just get free, and that's like, you know, the
Yes.
invention of Napster made music free, basically.
Yeah.
Because it sort of forced music to sort of compete with that, you know. So like we could, if we create a sound money system, it's not like normal money won't exist, but there's a giant check on, you know, governments to say like, listen, if inflation gets out of hand or you guys do something, we're going to go over here. And maybe that's a worthy goal, you know, like how much of the market share do you even need to
be that
accomplish
check.
it?
Not much.
Not much.
I think if it like, so if one of Tellor's core values, you know, continues to be decentralization and into the future,
Sure.
we can, you know, go whatever blockchain we put a Tellor Oracle on, you know, and our communities interact, then we can help share that value.
sure.
We can help, you know, maybe influence these other blockchains in some positive way that way. Like,
Yeah. And I think, I feel like at some point we want to make like a Tellor outreach program. Because like I was talking with Mike the other day, like of people we hired, like I remember originally whenever we're like, oh, we want to hire people with similar values to us. And now I look back and like Mike and Brenda didn't even have similar values to me. Like no one did. And we're all like working kind of towards the same goal now. Like, I mean, how many of you guys were like Austrian economist libertarians? Like none of you. But it's a-okay, and that's super cool. So
I somehow
you
don't
can
think that
Yeah.
our goals though were very different. Like we might come at it with different values for some reason, but our actual goal was actually very similar.
Sure.
It's very odd, but it works. And I think that is true for a lot of people. You can view things a different way, but want the same outcome.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a microcosm of like the experience of Tellor growing. You know, we're going to have a larger variety and yeah, just varying opinions, and it could get messy, but as long as we have some sort of unifying set of core values that sort of keeps us all on the same track. I think that's super pivotal that we sort of establish what that is, because as we grow, like you can all of a sudden, you know, lose yourself. You know, Josh, you were talking about like crypto.com and just this swell of crypto growing so fast, and you mentioned Facebook, but would you say that like Facebook has lost its way compared to where it was like in the first couple of years of its existence? Like, I don't know, but maybe Facebook never had any values, and that's probably true. But like the experience of being on Facebook is not what we all came there for originally. Like we're not getting that experience anymore. And like we want to make sure that like one day we don't say that about Tellor. That like, okay, this isn't the DAO that we wanted it to be.
Well, that's what I think is kind of crucial and pivotal about this time, is that with just not as many users, there's not as many just people knowing about Web3, there's a chance for us right now to kind of like lay that infrastructure. And if you kind of just through, I guess, precedence, kind of keep laying the foundation of like, no, this is what the space should be. No, this is what the space should be. And again, so long as we all have that core underlying value of like decentralization, I think people will naturally acquiesce to the foundation that's already in place. So that's what I think is kind of crucial about right now. And I think it's essentially what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some things about like the Facebook example, and like as we talk about, you know, everything being an experiment, and so we have these sets of experiments that we learn from and apply and learn from and apply. I think where we're similar to Facebook is that they did the same thing. They were just driven by addiction and like getting people plugged in, creating experiences that would keep somebody wanting that dopamine hit to come back, the likes, the engagement, the feeling connected without truly being connected. And they ran those experiments kind of to ensure that level of addiction. And they got a lot of mass adoption because of it. They have, you know, so much reach because they've tapped into that ability to kind of keep people needing what they offer. But they did it through a bunch of experiments along the way. And so I think it's, as we talk about our experiments and knowing where we want to go, as long as we stay positioned on what we hope to achieve and not like what our experiments are teaching us each way, there's always going to be like, oh, nice, we learned this. Oh, nice, we learned this. And as you apply those learnings, what do you do with them? Like making sure you take a step back and say, oh, we actually have an ecosystem that's doing this thing. Is this thing intended? Are we seizing this as an opportunity, or is this something that's has intended consequences or unintended consequences that we should be mindful of?
And that's cool about being an open source project where everything's in code, and anybody, at least the ones that know how to look at our code, but anybody can come and look and see what are our values codified in how we built the thing. You can actually look under the hood and point to like, oh no, you have an admin key. Like this doesn't jive with what you say. We removed our admin key, but that's like a key example. Like you could have, when we had one, like it was open and anybody could sort of see that and call us out. We called ourselves out in the long run, but anyway, you get my point. Like being an open source, this is something that crypto in general does really well, but being open source and having the code out there allows the communities to sort of be more of that conversation, be more at a peer level with the developers of the project themselves. Everybody can talk on the same wavelength because it's all open and out there and on the table. you can sort of check like, hey,
One thing,
are we doing what we say we want to do?
It allows people to fork and tweak, going back to
Yes.
that experiment phase, which is, that's that's one of the reasons like the space really like, if you're not an open source project, please be, please move in that direction. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Spuddy.
I actually forgot what I was gonna say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And if not fork, Brenda, like at least make a proposal for a protocol change. That's again, that's something that we built in that allows us to, as a community, share responsibility on how things change and develop in the future.
One thing that I forget which part of the conversation I'm responding to, but you don't see anybody like on crypto Twitter or on Reddit or in any of the forums. You don't see anybody talking about the Oracle problem anymore. Like there's nobody discussing like this is a problem that needs to be solved. So is that, and then like, is that
We
a
solved
marketing
it, buddy.
strategy of
I'm
another
kidding.
Oracle project, or is that, why? How did that conversation go away? It just disappeared.
NFTs.
So
The topic changed.
Tellor was created to solve, like to be a decentralized solution to the Oracle problem.
Well, I think in a lot of ways too, it's like nobody talks about like solving the scaling problem anymore as much. It's much more about like what trade-offs are you willing to make to solve the scaling problem, and I think people are coming around with oracles too, like in realizing that it's not that
in the developer community.
Yeah, in the developer community for sure. It's just like, the Oracle problem is actually just about trade-offs. Like where are you willing to take some decentralization out, and where are you willing? What do you need speed for? What do you need security for?
Like, is it an understanding of risk?
Yeah, it's
I feel like crypto and like the crypto Twitter folks, the crypto investors and traders, I think they're satisfied with just like with scaling. Okay, like this problem gets introduced, it spreads, people realize it's a thing, and then new projects crop up with marketing saying that this is what they're tackling, and then everybody's just sort of satisfied with that.
They say there's an abundance of like marketing language that by teams that say we have solved this.
Right, and that same thing happened with the Oracle problem.
Yes,
You had like 10 oracles pop up, and then I think that the community all got satisfied. Well, like, I guess it must be solved. There's enough people working on it. We don't know the difference between any of them, and that's fine.
And when I Google it, the first thing that pops up is somebody saying that it's solved now because of my solution.
Right.
yeah. Well,
The power of suggestion.
yeah. Well, let's call more people out. Well, I'm going to call out somebody in the community who's not even part of the team. Daryl, anything you want to say? Daryl he is not part of the team, but he's heard about Tellor, so he joined the call.
I guess what immediately comes to mind is that different solutions are going to require different value sets. And so it kind of depends on what solution you're trying to solve, and maintaining your integrity with your core values as you pursue that solution is going to basically, shape the world around you and the people who adopt your solution. So there's the thing about decentralization that kind of you don't really know where it's going to go, and you can't really control that. People vote with their attention, they vote with their effort and their time. And so, I guess if you're seeking to provide a useful solution, it has to be useful to a certain group of people. And so I guess targeting your audience and then finding out what they value and then crafting a solution that would fit for them is kind of what you're going for. Especially where it's kind of the Wild West. You don't really know, like people are just hopping all over the place, like you were saying with, oh, we got a solution to this problem, but do you really? Is it really any good? How do we know? And how long does it take to find that out? So we'll see. I don't really think there's a need to like, guess stress over where it's going to go at this point. I think I think the communities, as they become stronger, are going to kind of branch off and do their own thing accordingly.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. You brought up something that made me think, how would Tellor have looked if we asked users what they needed and built to what their requirements were, like from the get-go? You know,
Oh, well,
basically
you would
like
just look
what's-
like Chainlink. I mean,
Yeah.
you would, I mean, if it was that, you would just have like, you would almost try and forego the facade of decentralization. I mean, Chainlink goes through a lot of effort to make it look, you know, like you have more nodes, like just run the nodes yourself, like, and then yeah, be a centralized Oracle service.
We take responsibility for feeding me data.
Yeah. Well, that's what people want. They want, I'll send you $100 a month and you send data to the smart contract. And then
Yep.
that would be, you know, if a lot of users don't care about decentralization, that's what a lot of them would be fine with. So
I know somebody could probably quote Steve Jobs here, but like he was like, he had the sentiment, I don't know exactly what he said, I'm gonna butcher this, but it was the idea that like, no, your user doesn't know what's best for them. You know what I mean? Like, trust that you know what's best for them and build to that thing, and then they'll sort of come to you, and it's almost like showing sort of leadership in a way. And
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah,
Especially in
actually,
an early industry.
Yeah, I mean, what was it that Ford said? Like, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd say faster horses. Like, it's
There you
it's
go.
kind of like that. Like, it's the flip side of that too goes kind of back to experimentation and like having a background in user experience. Like, I'm like, oh, you always want to ask the people what you want. Like when you're building an MVP, you always want to get that feedback. You always want to understand the real life problems people are having. You don't necessarily have to ask them for what their solution would be, but you definitely need to know what their problem is. And so like it's not so much a function of asking a community for them to brainstorm their own fix, but it is asking the community to know kind of what is your problem? What do you run into? Like why is this a pain point? And from that's where that leadership comes and says, like, I'm connecting all these dots. That's where innovation is. It's connecting the dots. And building something that solves that in a way that, you know, people feel an ease of pain from, like relief from. And that's kind of the recipe for adoption. That's the recipe for evangelists, is because you have these people that their lives were fixed because a certain thing works better. They didn't know how to fix it themselves, and somebody else came along and did it for them. And yeah, it's kind of wrangling of both of those camps of listening to people from the very beginning, but listening to the right kinds of things.
yeah, that goes back into the waiting game and the long-term approach, because sometimes you have to wait for the user to sort of either get educated, or like some like technology to just get developed in a way that allows you to both like handle their pain points, stick to your guns with how you want to go ahead, you know, solve these problems. And it's not always aligned. It's like,
Yeah,
doesn't always
time in
happen
the
in
market
same
is
time
crazy.
frame. Yeah.
Lauren, thoughts from the stars. What do we have?
Got the sweatshirt on and everything.
Yeah.
Something that a few people touched on was like the next era of technology, like having values or whatever. And I think that any set of technology like that can't exactly have its own inherent values and just kind of reflects who uses it. So for example, like I think sometimes crypto might get a bad rap because some of the people that are loudest about it online don't necessarily have kind of the values that we do. So I'm just thinking like on Twitter, there's like these NFT guys that are talking about how it's so great to be in that future of the internet because for the first time you can like display your status online, which I would argue is probably one of the worst things about like the internet now and Facebook and Instagram and things like that. So I talk to a lot of people now who like know that I'm involved with this, and they're like, oh, isn't that the worst? And I'm like, yeah, I think that's the worst personally, but there's this whole other side of it where people with different values than that are kind of making their own projects and going about it in their own way. And like, that's a future worth looking into, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's always really hard to say, like, you know, some projects might not have their own values. Like, you know, that's like Ethereum had always had the problem, like, whenever people said, oh, well, you can store anything on the blockchain, or you can, you know, create anything on the blockchain. And the question regulators always ask is like, well, what if you made a contract to kill someone?
Yeah.
You know, and then like, would you as a community allow that? And, you know, it's like, as a base set of a community, you can. I mean, you want to be sort of so censorship resistant that you can't take that offline. But then, you know, what's your job? What, you know, do you censor it as a community? And I think there's just, it does come into, though, you still can have values, I think, as a community, and in sort of who you're supporting, who you're helping to actually build some of these things, you know, whenever you're like, even if you look at Ethereum versus say like a Bitcoin, you know, they're relatively similar technologies, but just the ideas and sort of the values that have molded were sort of instigated by the communities. And yeah, so I think like even with Tellor, like even if the underlying protocols have roughly similar technologies, you can still have values built into one versus
Yeah,
the
like
other.
personalities almost.
Yeah. So, but thank you, Lauren. Other people we haven't got to, Tim. You've been quiet.
Yeah. A big thing that really draws me to this space is the ability to try out different forms of social organization. I guess before blockchain was invented, you had to, like, to try out a new money, you had to either be a government or take the risk of trying to create a company that can create a money and probably get shut down. Or to try to create different types of like organizations before, again, you would have to create some kind of strange legal structures, I guess. And now like anyone who can code a little bit can try to write some like new type of organization. Yeah, it enables like people from all over the world with different perspectives and people that see different needs to try to fill, to meet those needs. And
that's cool.
That's cool, yeah. Yeah. And so also along the lines of like Facebook and Twitter, they used to have, I think at least Twitter had like some API that a lot of people used. Like people were building businesses off of this API, and then they like shut that down at some point. And then so all these people that are building things off of that, they shut down their businesses. And then, so another great thing about this space is that, you know, if like some protocol wants to shut down, anyone using that can just continue to keep using that protocol they were using. And they can just fork a protocol that is taking a bad direction and just keep going in the direction they want to go in. So, and that kind of like provides a backstop to us, kind of like the Napster example in the music industry. We kind of have a natural backstop in that it's relatively easy to like just fork each of these protocols in the Web3 space and make slight alterations.
Oh, so you're saying like the example of like these alternatives keeping the big players in check, just the fact that like a fundamental aspect of these projects are that they're forkable, because, you know, anybody could just copy and paste it and start it again in their own way. The fact that we have that looming I don't know if you want to say looming, but like that threat is always there. So that we have to make sure that we keep in check, or we don't get too greedy or start doing something the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's much easier to fork Tellor than it is to fork Facebook, which is not all sitting there out in the open.
Yeah, super cool.
One other thought that crossed my mind in this discussion is I saw like a tweet yesterday from Jack Dorsey about how Web3 is controlled just by a couple rich organizations like Andreessen Horowitz, which seems like that's somewhat the case. But I guess one thing I'd note about Tellor is that we don't have that VC backing.
Right.
And also any project that makes it, that's great. People, maybe a small set of rich people come about because of that. But then again, you can still create new protocols and new communities can pop up around that to create new, more decentralized protocols.
Yeah, I mean, you were in Raid Guild. We've taken part in DAOs. Like, do you feel controlled by Andreessen Horowitz, Tim?
No, not at all.
No, yeah. I mean, same with Tellor. Like, it's like I don't feel controlled by any VCs. And I think there's a big difference between the VCs made a whole lot of money off the space and a whole lot of, but I'd say VCs scammed retail and made a whole lot of money that way. That's a whole lot different than the developers and the projects themselves are beholden to VCs. Like the code's all open source. Like nobody, at least the majority of it is. So yeah, I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's like whatever some people over there are doing, that doesn't really affect us over here.
No,
we can keep doing what we can keep marching forward.
Yeah. So anyway,
That's a
Sean.
good point.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's a good point, Tim, around the organization of people. Like, that's how I sort of see it. Like, even thinking there were like, most people worked on farms in the early 1800s, then it, maybe factories, then corporations. That's like very simplified view of it, but still today, like most activity is done through corporations like Facebook, Microsoft, Google. So in that way, I think there's a lot to come for like decentralized or DAOs, however people figure out how to organize themselves to capture economic activity is the big like thing that's gonna shift, I think. And it just made me think, because like Tim said, if someone wants to fork a project, like they'll be probably small, but a ton of applications. But the biggest pieces will be like, I don't know, maybe the protocol layers like Ethereum or Bitcoin. So I think there's just a ton to evolve, but all centered around like that, how people organize and like where economic activity happens.
Yeah. DAOs.
Something
DAOs,
that
man.
scares me about DAOs is that they'll end up being like the same board of directors at some company, like right now. Like how many of you actually vote on your stocks? Like when you get those emails that tell you have to go vote on something. And everybody
I don't think any of us
concurring.
own stocks besides you,
That's
Brenda.
you're the stock whale.
Whatever. But like that's what's scary about DAOs though. It's like if everybody just like what do we call it? You defer your vote to somebody else. It's gonna be like 5 people driving the entire DAO. And I think that goes back to when this DAO, or even as we go move into a DAO, we want to make sure that the community becomes involved enough and that hopefully resembles our values enough and has similar goals for the long term, so that when we are actually not part of it, that it's not like 2 or 3 people just saying what's going to happen and not even allowing the voice of the community to be heard. But that's I don't know, maybe that's just
I don't know how we solve for that's like the
work,
human.
but yeah, I know that maybe that's just how it works, but
Yeah.
hopefully it just takes longer or it's enough time between when that happens. um, so that people can actually like just decide to fork and go their own way. But that's why it's so important, like, you know, freedom.
It's definitely an important component. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
one way
Yeah, it
to
makes me
do that.
Oh god.
Oh, go ahead, Taylor. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, it makes me really thankful that technologies like Discord are available because they really like help to engage in the human component. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe the answer to that, Brenda, is just to keep DAOs as small as possible. So you can have the tiniest group of people that cares about a certain thing. And, you know, if you think about something like, you know, real communities like a neighborhood or a homeowners association, these people care. It's where they live. It's a small group of people. So I don't know, maybe that's the definition of success, is when a group like that of everyday people can organize and you know, pool their money and their resources and vote on things that they care about. Then the question is, what technologies, what, you know, properly decentralized technologies can they use to do that? So, but yeah, I think just, I don't know of any other way besides keeping things small, because when things get big, crazy things start to happen.
Definitely, definitely. But I guess we will try to keep our community as involved as possible between now and when we actually turn into a DAO.
Cool. Owen or Ryan, I know you're not on cameras, but if you had anything to
Sure.
say. Okay.
Yeah, my internet is a little trash right now. You guys are cutting out, so I don't know if I am. It's basically like my satellite dish is made out of clamshells that I collected on the beach. But yeah, so overall, I'm just like happy to be in a space where, you know, like general, you know, a lot of general work chat and building is going on in public. I mean, there's been a lot of comparing to Facebook. What do you mean? Even just take to play devil's advocate, like Facebook, there's a lot of Facebook animosity, but you know, it serves about 3 billion people, which is like over a third, you know, of the entire world population. You know, it's providing a lot of marketplaces for people to, you know, sell their goods and like conduct their daily business. You know, that's a lot of monthly users. And you know, Facebook doesn't have I don't see the Zuck doing, you know, in the early days, like values calls, anything like that. Or having, you know, a place where the community can just like say, yo, the software you're putting out sucks, please improve. Yeah, so I don't know. That's why I'm happy to be here. In general, as things grow bigger, like, yeah, I mean, what was mentioned earlier, like, you know, can we actually have some sort of structure where, you know, like outside of like a few people who like control like this tool that is used by like tons of people? I don't know, until we get like open source Neuralink or whatever. But yeah, as long as we have it open source and just continue having these kind of things, that I'm pretty hopeful for the project and tools that it develops. I mean, going back to Facebook, like React is used by, you know, tons of people, and that's, you know, built by them originally, and a lot of good things have been made by that, I'm assuming. So yeah.
Yeah. Ryan?
Final word for you, Ryan. You got to wrap this all up in a bow.
Yeah, and you can't be a Facebook apologist like Owen.
Hold on. Hold on. There's Dempsey too. Yes, and
That's
Todd.
true.
Yeah, and Tamse, if you want to talk too, please.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
For
You're
the
a real
first
person.
time, I guess.
You speak.
Yes.
Let's go.
I leave. Yeah, so yeah, it was interesting to hear everyone's thoughts. Yeah, for me, I was actually complaining the other day about this, so that how can we get more how can we interact more with Tellor and with the community. Yeah, one of the things is definitely Ethereum will have to come to a certain point where it's cheap enough for people to actually start participating in everything. Because yeah, okay, we have votes occasionally now, maybe in a couple of weeks, months, or whatever. But once, yeah, we would like to vote on more things or decide things, then yeah, those costs adds up, and yeah, eventually you could run into trouble that yeah, maybe a lot of people cannot or don't want to participate. But other than that, I really enjoy being here, and even though the community is still getting more active, because as we can see, it does get more active on Discord. I really hope that we will get to a point that we will have these big chats and discussions on Discord about everything really, because even though I'm not that technical in crypto and programming, I do like to read what the developers are doing and what they are discussing. And yeah, yeah, that's more or less what was not really said until now. I also, yeah, I was nodding a lot during everyone's thoughts, because I do agree with a lot of you guys. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Tim.
Cool.
Ryan, I'm sorry. You get to wrap things up.
Forgive you. Can you guys hear me? I'm in the car right now.
No, you sound good.
Okay. Yeah, I think the theme that I'm getting from this overall talk is like, I mean, it sounds like Web3 is a big topic, and one of the main points that I wanted to make was just like kind of piggybacking off what Clam did, or Mike Bapp said, aka Clam Dad, was that just the Web3 technology is essentially allowing us to kind of create these communities and like allocate resources much more efficiently than Web 2 is allowing us to do. Like Web 2 is just very much communities built on centralized platforms, but now we're able to essentially, you know, create tokens and mint them and make them work in a way that works for the community specifically, and so that it doesn't also affect other communities. But one other thing that recently popped up, I don't know if you said it, but I thought it was interesting how like the mainstream adaptability of Tellor doesn't necessarily directly correlate with the community size of Tellor. Like, because it's open sourced, the tight-knit community of Tellor kind of operates in its own right, and the adaptability of the code and the software itself will take on a life of its own. So I just think that's an interesting dynamic that I haven't really thought about. I think I'll leave that question open.
If you want to wrap it up. Well, it's been over an hour. Just want to thank everybody for showing up and sharing your thoughts. And this was really cool. We had some community members here, and our team is growing really big. And we talked about some big ideas. There's no really endpoint in this discussion. I think it's just something that's an ongoing process that we need to do regularly, like we mentioned at the top of the call. So let's not wait too long to do this one again.
Yeah, and I think next time maybe we can take a look at how we're actually doing almost.
Yeah.
You know, we can have some retrospect on, okay, you know, we've been alive for a while. Like, are we accomplishing these goals? Like, we know from this call we're sort of focused in a way, but you know, let's look back in 3 months and say, all right, how's it going? You know, is crypto getting better? Are we still moving towards the same things, or do we need to move? But yeah, no, it's
like Daryl, Tansy, like the community, call us out in 3 months. So you know what we're trying to accomplish now, and hopefully we get closer to it. I'm sorry, what?
He's just, but he's saying they do call us out.
They
Yeah.
call us out all the time. yeah.
In the meme
We'll
channel.
continue, but during our next call.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect.
This was awesome, everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks everyone for opinions. If you have more comments on the Discord, let's keep the conversation going as long as you guys want. And yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, see you guys. Bye-bye.